Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Workshop C on the future of media. The workshop's so popular that we have no competition. You're forced to sit and listen to us. Just before we start, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Jeremy Thompson. I'm Managing Director of the Gorkana Group, the UK's leading media intelligence business. I'm sure some of you will disagree with that, but you're not on the platform. More importantly, I'd like to introduce my panel today. So, as you're looking at them from right to left, and in the order that they are going to speak this morning, first off, Andy Brown, who's chairman of Kantar Media, who are our hosts and our conference sponsor. So, thank you to Andy and his team for a wonderful event so far. Casey Brown, who's General Manager of Cision Global Analysts, John Kroll, CEO of Sentia Media, Mazen Nahawi, President of News Group, and Douglas McCabe, COO of Enders Analysis. You've all got a green book with full biographies and pictures from about 10 years ago, so you can read all about them, or 20 years ago in some cases. The title of this session is the Future of Media, but our objective is to explore what's happening to the media landscape today across the world, and to discuss how we need to adapt to address challenges in our markets and take advantage of what we believe to be cracking opportunities to grow. We are going to hear from our panel of industry experts, industry leaders, and also get some third-party expertise from Douglas, who is here representing Enders Analysis, who are a leading market research firm, who do a lot of work in the media space. The good news is that we are all pretty optimistic about our future. And according to AMEC's own business monitor, 2 out of 3 businesses in this industry are growing today, and many are citing growth of new revenue streams in social and online. And we think that is a major reason for optimism. But the way today's session is going to work is we are each going to give you a perspective on our markets. We are going to spend 10 minutes each. We've then got 5 minutes or so for questions at the end of each of our sessions. Douglas is going to give us an overview of what Enders are seeing around the world in terms of media consumption habits and so on. And then we're going to spend half an hour or so debating the challenges and opportunities. And I would encourage you to be as engaged as possible, ask us questions, and in the last half hour, let's get a good debate going. But first off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the UK. And we've run sessions like this before, so we don't want to repeat ourselves, but a lot of the things we're seeing are continuing to happen, and some are starting to gather pace. But some of the headlines from the UK will probably be of no news to you, and I'm sure they are reflective of headlines elsewhere around the world. And in most markets around the world, print newspapers are in decline. They certainly are in the UK, not to the same extent perhaps as they are in the US, but Monday to Friday circulations are in steady decline. Saturday editions are actually on the increase. And interestingly, I was talking with Douglas before this session about why that might be, and it's partly because Sunday used to be the big newspaper day in the UK, but now that people are spending more time shopping and doing things that they didn't used to do on Sundays, actually Saturday is where the newspapers have put a lot of their emphasis. There is a definite shift in platform use. People are switching from print to digital editions, and that's presenting a range of challenges, which I'll talk about in a second. But there is a lot of change going on in the UK, and newspapers are trying to adapt. There are lots of different models in play. The real losers at the moment are regional and local newspapers. There were 242 closures of local newspapers or so in the last 5 years. And a lot of regional newspapers aren't closing, but they're going from dailies to weeklies. They are all suffering from the same thing. Their advertising revenues have been slammed by the rise of online advertising and by the movement away from classifieds in newspapers to specific online channels where if you go to shop for a car, you don't look in your regional newspaper anymore. You go to autotrader.co.uk. That's happening across the board. But there are some good news stories, and there are a couple of, in terms of audience, big news stories in the UK. One is that the Mail Online earlier this year overtook the New York Times as the biggest online newspaper in the world. They've got something like 90 million unique browsers registered worldwide. It's a very different publication to the newspaper. The Mail in the UK is it's a pretty dull newspaper. Most of us here from the UK probably wouldn't read it, but it has a particular type of reputation. The online equivalent is completely different. It is a gossip, online gossip magazine, very big in the States apparently, and it is doing hugely well in audience terms, but maybe not necessarily quite so well in financial terms. And that is the story. In the UK, the businesses that are generating huge audiences aren't necessarily making any money, and The Guardian is a great example of that. The Guardian registered a staggering 4 million monthly user recently, which is a year-on-year increase of around 60%. It's the fastest growing national press website in the UK. But the Guardian Group, I'm sure most of you know, lose an awful lot of money. So how long is that model sustainable? How are they going to start monetizing that audience? One of the things that's driving online growth in the UK is social media, and I'll come on to why that is happening in a second. But it's also worth saying that broadcast is on the increase, and the use of broadcast is increasing. An awful lot of content that's viewed online is professional broadcast content, and traditional newspaper publishers are producing broadcast content to flesh out their online editions and make them more interactive and more dynamic. And around 50% of all online content viewed is professional broadcast content. And obviously social media and the rise of social media is the big story in the UK as it is elsewhere around the world. In the UK, we have 10 million registered users of Twitter and 30 million registered Facebook users. So a huge proportion of the population are using social media in their day-to-day lives. And that's presenting us with new revenue opportunities, but it also presents us with a range of challenges. I think there are a couple of other observations to make about the UK. One is, the BBC is still the biggest, one of the biggest news sites in the UK, but it is free to air. It's subsidised by the taxpayer, and that causes some of the traditional publishers an awful lot of trouble. We also have a major review of press standards in the UK, the Leveson Inquiry, which all started on the back of the News International phone hacking scandal. And that is having a big impact on the way that the public view and trust news organisations in the UK. And it actually led to the closure of the News of the World, which was our biggest print newspaper, although they've now restyled it or renamed it The Sun on Sunday. So Douglas can maybe tell us whether it's very different. I actually have never read it. If you've ever been to the UK and picked up News of the World, you might wonder about us as a nation. But anyway, it has gone. So what's going on? Well, the media for a long time, the newspaper groups were very scared. They were terrified about social media because they thought there was a risk that citizen journalism would somehow overtake professional journalism. But I think actually what they're now starting to find is that social is actually driving traffic back into traditional media channels. 60% of all internet users in the UK maintain some form of social networking profile. That's one of the highest rates of penetration in the world. Social networking is now one of the most popular online activities, and 1 in 6 page views in the UK are on Facebook. And the average usage is around 30 minutes or so per day. But news content is still extremely popular online. And Twitter and Facebook are actually now acting as pushers of news content directly to end users. And Facebook is a massive referrer of news of traffic to news sites and is rivaling Google search as a way of discovering news content. Twitter has also become a crucial tool for journalists for sourcing and distributing news stories. So people on the ground are breaking news, through their mobile phones. Journalists are picking up on that. They are reporting on events more quickly than they ever have done before, and they're also developing their own blogs, and they themselves are becoming influencers beyond the sort of traditional journalism. Social media is definitely helping UK newspapers. The Guardian, the Mail Online, they've grown their global audience partly through social media. And the Mail Online boasts 90 million monthly users or so, 60% of which is international, is outside of the UK. And journalists themselves are adopting Twitter to distribute news. They're gaining new authority and influence beyond that which they were able to get through the newspapers for whom they write. Robert Peston is one of the most prominent journalists in the UK today. He rose to fame on the back of the financial crisis in the UK. He's a very annoying speaker. He's not the kind of person you would expect to become hugely influential or popular. But he has made he's built a following of 150,000 or so through his own blog post, and he is the financial commentator now in the UK, and he is widely recognised as such. And sorry, for a second I thought that was Barry's new. If you're wondering what the lights are down the front, when that goes red, I'm done. So on that note, I just wanted to share a case study with you that explains, I hope, what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of the publishers in the UK are grappling with models that they believe will work in the online space. Some have brought down, News International have brought down paywalls. You don't get any content for free. The Guardian is still giving it away. In the middle, you've got the Financial Times, who I think you can get 5 articles a month and you start paying. And there are lots of different models in between, but some of them are starting to adapt. And The Economist is a publication that has actually a strong and growing circulation in the UK. Admittedly, it's got fairly specialist content, and it's seen as a leader in its market. But it has recognised that this phenomenon of social driving traffic back into online channels is something that they need to embrace. So if you just bring down a paywall and you don't let people get a flavour of your content, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. The digital editor of The Economist, Tom Standage, said that social media traffic now delivers half as many page views as Google. And this has clearly made Economist senior executives sit up and take note. It's meant introducing a more frequent publishing schedule, as well as educating staff about the value of getting involved in a conversation. From a business perspective, The Economist has also introduced a more flexible paywall, partly to ensure that social traffic doesn't get driven away. And it looks like it's working. I think we can only expect that more publishers will follow this path. But the key for today really is what does this mean for us? And I'm not going to spend too much time telling you guys what you need to do with your businesses, but what I will do is 2 things. First of all, tell you what Gorkana have done. In brief, Gorkana evolved out of a press cuttings business called Durrance. It came together with the UK's leading media analysis business Metrica and Gorkana, the journalist database. But if you go back 12 years, Gorkana, then Durrance, was still a cuttings business. We had a lot of people. We had, and in fact all of us who are here from Gorkana weren't actually there then, but we know because we've seen the pictures, they had a lot of people, a lot of scissors, lots of pots of glue, and about 4 million in sales. Today we have twice as many people, but we've got over 10 times the sales, and no scissors and no glue that I'm aware of. But monitoring today is getting closer to 50% of our revenue. Social, online, broadcast may still be very small revenue streams for us, but they represent a huge opportunity. So just to sort of wrap up my section, I think the things we need to be doing are fairly obvious. I think the first point is access to content is absolutely critical, and there was a story this morning about Cision settling a IP case with Dow Jones. And if publishers start restricting our access to content, that is going to make our lives difficult. And one of the things we need to do as an industry, and AMEC needs to do as an organisation, is engage with publishers to make sure that we maintain that access. And we were doing that very thing yesterday with the PDLN here in Dublin. We've got to demonstrate why we're a revenue opportunity to publishers, not a threat to circulation. But as businesses, we need to invest in social media. That's obvious, and Mazen ran a very well-received session this morning on exactly how we should do that. But I think the point I would make there is if we don't, there are bigger businesses out there in the marketing space who are starting to encroach on our territory, and if we don't act quickly, we'll get left behind. We should think about influencers, not journalists. Similarly, content, not medium. And what I mean by that is we get hung up on the fact that print newspapers are in decline. It's not really about print newspapers anymore, it's about content. And publishers are making content available in multiple platforms, and we need to be able to deliver integrated services that present analysis of that content wherever it appears at the time that it appears. Insight is key, clearly, but what I would say there is insight should be more about foresight, telling people based on what's happened in the past, what can you expect in the future, because it's no longer going to be good enough to deliver a report a month out of date that doesn't tell a business what they can do to act in the future. And add value. As content becomes increasingly easy to get hold of, we are no longer going to be able to keep making a lot of money out of purely aggregating content. It's what we do with that content that is key. And in fact, Gorkana in the UK has a license agreement with the Financial Times. Our agreement with them says we cannot charge for the content they deliver to us. All we can charge for is what we do with it, and that's exactly what we do. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a taste of what's going on in the UK and gets us off to a start this morning. I have got 1 minute and 15 seconds or thereabouts for any questions. So can I take any questions from the floor before we move on to Andy? He's going to talk about Europe and talk about a little bit more about just editorial as well, I think. Any questions at all? There must be one. That red light is saying 1 minute left, I think. Yes, if you could just say who you are and which organisation you represent.
Evgeny, ex-Libris Agency from Russia. I would like, you said very common things here, how you want to change, but I would like to ask you, for example, in social media, where do you want to invest, and how do you want to integrate the solutions into your business? Thank you.
At Gorkana, we've invested in a business called Brandwatch, who are one of the UK's leading social media monitoring businesses. And we're working with them to white label a service which we've integrated into our platform. And I think the point to make there is that social can't be a separate part of your business. You've got to find a way to make it integral to what we do, because it, in 5 years' time, it could be the heart of what we're delivering to our customers. So if it's a kind of offshoot that that Salesforce dominate, then we are going to get left behind. So I think it's about making sure that we build. This organisation needs to work out how we measure social media and how we present a professional, leading kind of. Present ourselves as an authority, to the market. Because the people we are working for they're still grappling with social. They know it's important, but they don't. Oftentimes they don't really know what to do with it. We need to be guiding them. We need to be investing in the services to do that. Does that answer your question, Evgeny? Yeah. Okay. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce you Andy Brown, Chairman of Kantar Media. Andy.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It's a great pleasure to be standing before you this morning. This is my first AMEC engagement, and I'm looking forward to it immensely. It's probably going to be the second most interesting WPP presentation in Dublin this morning. There's another one going on 100 yards up the road here, which is going to capture quite a lot of media attention, I believe. But if you'll bear with me for at least 15 minutes, I'd be really grateful. Thank you. Let's go. Let's kick on. Just by way of introduction, one of the things I will say is that I'm not going to bombard you with lots of data. I think you've already heard quite a few statistics coming out from Jeremy. You're going to hear a lot more as you go down the panel here. And I think one of the issues we have in the industry is data overload and pushing too much information. So what I'd like to do is really try to just synthesize some of the key themes that we see developing in the market in Europe, and how do we, as Kantar Media, feel that we need to react to that. And we'll show you some examples. This is a quote from Deepak Chopra, where he's just saying, really, that good things tend to come out of chaos, ultimately. You know, any great change, great reaction comes from chaos initially. And I think there is a bit of chaos out there at the moment. I think there are a lot of clients who are not quite sure what is happening and how to deal with the different media opportunities that are being created. We're all learning. The clients are learning, and I think the intermediaries, the marketing services companies are also learning about how we deal with what is a massive change in the market. Things used to be nice and easy. Things were so simple. I mean, I come from a background of media research and media measurement, and it used to be so easy. You used to have a measurement for this, a measurement for that. We measure television, we put people meters into people's homes, we have a panel of people, we run a readership survey, so we just go out and interview people. It was all nice and simple. And then people started doing two things, really. One, which I think they always probably did do, which was to read the newspaper and watch TV at the same time. But also, people started, as we've heard before, consuming media across different platforms. So what is television? Is it the thing that comes out of the box in the living room, or the thing on the wall in the living room? Is it the thing that you watch on the iPad? Is it what you catch up on the mobile? It's about the measurement of content across platforms. And our world has become somewhat more complicated, and in the fields of television audience measurement and print research, we've adapted to that change in digital and the things that are happening. And I think we need to do the same also with regard to earned media. I think I've got two charts with numbers on them. This is one of them, which is just looking at really the media mix in Europe. And this is taken from TGI, which is one of the services we run around the world, which looks at consumers' broad-based media consumption and product and lifestyle attributes. And it tells you that media consumption is increasing. Surprise, surprise, it's being largely dominated by the internet and television. This is the one that people are a little bit surprised by, because the general feeling was, oh, television is going to be killed by the internet. Television viewing is actually increasing in most markets around the world. And the other media, and the only loser on this chart really is radio, I'm ashamed to say. But generally speaking, the other media are kind of holding firm in terms of their share relative to where they were before. But the other key point is multitasking, is this multiple media consumption. No more so than with social. I'm sure there are people already in the room here tweeting about why won't this guy get off and we can get on with somebody who knows what he's talking about. But social, as we've heard, is changing the game, and it is changing the way that media are consumed. And there is that link. Jeremy talked about it in terms of print media and talked about it with regard to The Economist. In the field of television, for example, I don't know how many people in this room have heard of a product called ZBox. ZBox is a service that you download onto your smartphone or your iPad, and it's effectively a companion to while you're watching TV. So you have a Twitter feed in there. You have an estimate of how many people are actually watching the program is coming through this system. It's synchronized through an audio match with what's on screen, so it knows what you're watching, and is creating all kinds of new advertising opportunities. So ZBox have been fairly aggressive talking about their ad campaign opportunities around the Olympics, which in this country is broadcast on the BBC, in the UK it's broadcast on the BBC, which does not carry advertising. And it has this ability to disintermediate from the people who actually own the content, from the broadcasters who've paid for the rights of the content. And think of that from an earned media perspective. There's also a chance there to engage from a social perspective because it has Twitter in there, it links to Facebook, and there's the opportunity to potentially put messages or to stimulate messages in front of an audience in real time whilst they're consuming broadcast media. So it really is quite a big change. And I think, you know, this is the chart that I think gives us all a bit of heart, really, is because, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the advertiser client is also finding their way. They're also learning. But what they are asking for is return on investment. They're asking for to know, what did I get for my investment? And I think the social media domain is one of those areas where, again, there is real lack of clarity. People are investing. They don't know how much to invest, partly because they don't know what return necessarily they're getting in terms of the social media. And I think that's a great opportunity for us, particularly in this room. But as we all know, it doesn't exist in isolation, as I talked about before with ZBox and TV. These media don't exist in isolation. And campaigns increasingly from clients run across all media, both earned media, as well as, paid media as well as earned media, and also their own media in terms of their own websites, their own channels that they consume. And as Kantar Media, I mean, we are in a fortunate position in this sense because we do measure the traditional media and we do measure new media, and we across a whole range of different communication channels. And one of the things that we've been working on, and this is a sneak preview, is a thing called the Kantar Digital Share. And this basically is picking up on the concept of share of voice, which many of you in the room will be familiar with, particularly in traditional media, where the general theory is that there is a very strong link between your relative media investment and resonance in terms of market share with consumers. And so what we're doing here is to try to extend that to digital and look at a whole raft of different media channels and bring them together. This is something that we're partnering with Google on. And we're looking at everything from online buzz in the earned media space, looking at how many social fans and some site traffic based from our internet measurement solutions, and then linking that up with paid search data in terms of paid search clicks, and also online advertising expenditure. And we can put that all together into a system and have the analysis all on one screen for the client. So this is not meant for you to read. The data is real data. It comes out of the telecoms market in France and is looking at the relative digital shares of the brands in that category. And it's a simple, very easy to use device which you can then plug into your tracking survey or other analytic frameworks that you might be using. So, and I'm ahead of time here, so you can grill me with more questions. So is this the point where I start to filibuster and really slow down? You just weren't yellow. Oh, good. I'm on my last 45 seconds. Thank you. So I think the massive changes that are taking place in terms of consumers' media behaviour is fantastic for the industry, and I think it's fantastic for the research industry. People often, say, "Oh, it's a disaster." Your life surely is much more complex than it used to be. Yeah, and it's much more interesting than it used to be. And I think there are great opportunities there for us as an industry. It's changing how brands are communicating, and it changes how we have to go about measuring those communications. I think there's a growing acceptance of this paid, owned, and earned media concept. I think that's becoming very much a common language now in the industry. From our perspective, I think we feel very strongly that things, you can measure individual components, but things do not sit in isolation, and it's important to try to measure things as holistically as possible. And our clients are telling us that they want that. And that often is quite difficult for us because that will mean okay, we have to go and work with one of our competitors. We want to work with, I don't know, Nielsen data or GfK data. We want to link that in with your own Kantar media data. And that's something that we have to grow up, and we have to work with clients on that. I think there's just an insatiable demand for return on investment. I think we've seen it run through the traditional media business, and I think it's being extended now, partly, I think, because of the perceived accountability of digital in a certain sense, with click-through rates, etc. So I think what's happened with digital has helped and stimulated this demand amongst clients for greater accountability in the earned space, as well as in terms of the paid media space. And as I said, right at the top there, that I think this creates great opportunity for us. I think I'm very optimistic about what's possible here for the people in this room within AMEC, and obviously for Kantar Media. I think it's a great opportunity for the industry. And with that, you have 3.5 minutes left to ask me questions.
Barry asked us not to mention this thing because he thought you would all focus on it.
Oh, so I don't think they noticed. I don't think they noticed, Jeremy.
How can you not notice it?
Hi.
Thank you. My name is Asim Sood. I'm from Impact Research and Measurement India. You mentioned you're partnering with Google.
Yes.
Is it to improve your analyticals, and can you tell us more about that?
I can tell you a little bit about it. We are the product was kind of jointly developed in a brainstorming session with Google, and they are supplying certain components of the analytics on a sort of preferential basis to us. But that's probably all I can say.
All right. Thank you.
The gentleman down here has a question.
Based on that, the chart, the 09 versus 11 usage that you had up,
Right.
you had what was the margin of error for that? I mean, I noticed that you went from like 39 to 41 on newspapers.
Right. I mean, the first thing I should do to qualify that, there's two things in here. One is that it's filtered through online. I didn't make that clear necessarily in the outset. So these are online media consumers. So generally speaking, they're going to have a slightly higher propensity to consume media per se, and they tend to be strong, generally speaking, stronger than average to consume news media. So that will be distorting the numbers slightly. The other component is it is self-claim data, so it is what people perceive. And we do not specifically ask the question, when you talk about newspapers, are you talking about a physical hard copy, or are you talking about online readership of a newspaper? So we don't know from that which source. It's effectively what they recall rather than a specific.
So you also don't know whether that was then an aggregated news site like a Yahoo or a Google News.
No. Absolutely. It was a generic question. We do, and we can create specific measurements of those, but in that, this was designed just to give a general overview of the European consumer.
Andy, what was a brainstorming session with Google like?
Oh, it's fun. You get loads of sweets. It's wonderful. And you go to you go to their office. They have these most incredibly interesting people from massively different backgrounds, and they challenge everything. Some of the people there are fascinating. They challenge absolutely everything, all the constructs that you've kind of worked with for years, and they will come in with a completely fresh pair of eyes and completely invert the problem, look at it from a completely different perspective, and you go, either that's brilliant, or maybe it's not. No. Generally speaking, they look at things from a completely different perspective. They do have a lot of money to spend, so they'll go, okay, I've always wanted to know. I wonder whether, okay, well, there's $800,000 or $1 million to go and answer a question, and they're brilliant like that, and they have immense capacity to invest in these what-if scenarios. I've always wanted to know this. What if we did this? Why don't we try it? It's incredibly refreshing as an experience.
Right, thank you very much, Andy.
One more question. Did you approach Google or did Google approach you?
Well, Google is our client. We have a big relationship with Google, and we said, how can we help you further? Well, could we have a discussion around areas that where they could be mutually beneficial? Okay, thank you very much.
Andy, thank you very much.
It's Andy Brown, Casey Brown, no relation, in case you're wondering. Jeremy said he was optimistic. Andy said he was optimistic, and I'll tell you that I'm an optimist, but I'm pessimistic about the future of media and how it applies to most of us in this room, and it has to do with the theme that I see within the United States and greater in North America about where media is going and what the implications are for us. So let me see if this is the magic button. Because it has almost everything to do with big data. And you probably hear this term used a lot. And so I want to extract three things that are somewhat related to big data. One of the 3 points is actually called big data. And what implications that has for us as an industry. And the first one you've heard a lot about, all of the billions of tweets here and the number of blog posts and who's creating content. And the 3 points around that I think are interesting. One is that everything's moving to digital first. Second, that there's the rising role of the influencers, and influencers as individuals as opposed to outlets. And three, the implications of big data itself. Let's see here if I can push the button. The first one is, and we've heard lots of, already, and we'll hear probably more statistics about what it means, that things are moving from print to digital, from, a traditional broadcast to a streaming. But what's interesting to me is that media are switching from being, going from print to digital. It used to be, we need to have an online presence as well. We're still going to keep our same editorial calendar. We're still going to keep our editorial approach, but then we're going to represent it in the digital world as well. Or we're going to tap into social media as a way to drive traffic or whatever, but still keeping our same editorial goals. Well, we're seeing a big shift in the United States on this, in that it's the timing of news, the assignment of editors, the assignment of journalists is less rigid. There's no kind of, you don't get the news anymore. You don't say, I'm going to watch it at this time, I'm going to read it at that time. There's no news cycle per se. And everything's moving to digital first, and there's lots of implications for that. One of which is, even what's being assigned to people is almost in a reaction to what's being said. So the editorial agendas start to go away. The timing of when something's going to come out is often not tied to what you would normally think of as a news cycle, but instead, how do I jump onto this bandwagon? How do I get out in front of things? And the distribution has everything to do, not with the print, but it has to do with the mobile. So they're taking a digital-first strategy. And even within our own business, we're having to take a digital-first strategy. And I speak here of Cision as a whole, not just Cision Global Analysts. To the tune that, over the past 3 years, we've divested 7 non-digital businesses within our own company, and because we recognize that trend and the way that everything has to move there. Some quotes here that you can read, I won't go into, but that emphasize this point. So what are the implications for this? Number one is there's new units of time. We used to think of things as, this news cycle, this day, or this week, as far as how we are measuring things. And it's no longer, we can no longer think of them that way. It's now T minus this or T plus that. And that T is whatever an event is. And that event can either be a client-enacted event, something that they've done proactively, or it can be an event that was thrown at them, something that happened, the event can be a customer interaction that's then gone social. And that becomes our measurement of time, no longer a normal editorial cycle. The next big one is, I think of it as the return of the video news release, which I really don't think that's what it's going to be, but now it's going to be sponsored content. And this is something that we're really struggling with as all things move digital. Our clients are producing and packaging content that is not a commercial, it is not paid. It's not necessarily owned content in the sense that they are hosting it in an environment that they brand. It is quasi-earned. They are producing it, but they are offering it to editorial outlets to share. And there's a big implication on what does that mean and how do we track it. And the things that we normally look at related to, are there messages getting across? The normal content analysis that we look at becomes somewhat irrelevant because it is that within that little frame, that digital frame, they have complete control. What they don't have complete control over is where it's picked up and where it's distributed. So this sponsored content, I think, is something that we're going to see a whole lot of. And that is that digital-first strategy that is not only happening on the editorial side, but it's happening on the client side, too. So the next one, the rise of the influencer. And I think we've discussed this quite a bit, and I imagine we will continue to do so, where there's the Jeremy mentioned the number of local outlets that have gone away, and we find that as well in the United States. And so the number of outlets that are relevant, rather than there being an explosion of them, we're actually seeing somewhat of a consolidation of those. We're finding that journalists are recognizing that I can no longer count alone on the outlet that I work for to distribute my content and to draw an audience. Instead, I have to go out and I have to do some of that myself. And in a survey that we did among U.S. journalists, as you can see, we saw 71% of them basically go out and pitch their own stories through social channels to draw an audience to their specific stories, not necessarily to their outlet. So in many ways, they're already freelancers, even if they're even if they are hired by a specific outlet. So some implications for this. One, as I say, is the triumph of the New York Times, or you could say the triumph of the Guardian, or whichever one it is that that a few major outlets, I think, are going to continue to rise to the top, and it's those that figure out not just a way to draw the audience, but also to monetize that, to make that a sustainable business, such that they can have an editorial agenda, and those that say, all media is going to be personally crafted. I'm going to have my own newspaper. They give more credit than I think due to a lot of people. Me, I like having an outlet like the New York Times or The Economist to go out there and find the stories that are important, that they play an editorial function. To me, that's an important role. And so I'm drawn to those, and even though I live in a large city, I don't even look at my own. I live in Chicago. I don't even look at Chicago papers. I shouldn't be ashamed to say that. That's true. I prefer other outlets because I find a higher editorial calling there, and so I think you're going to see kind of the cream rise to the top there. And the other one is I think we're going to have branded reporters. I think they are, a few are going to be known for the hard work that they do, and they will rise to the top. So you'll end up with kind of a two-tier, very branded reporters, some of which may be tied to outlets, and then you're going to have basically tier one outlets, and then there's going to be a mishmash of everything else in between. The next one is big data. Now, if you think big data and you think a database, you're wrong. Big data will not fit in a database. It's bigger than that. And if you want to get into that discussion, we can go further. But the absolute explosion of data is something that, in the United States, at heart, I think we're all Texans, and we want everything big. And so in the United States, at least, we are enamored with data, much in the way that kind of the early pilgrims, to the United States looked and saw what they perceived to be an endless forest that they could that they could build a new world out of. That's the way that many, if not media people, at least financial people are looking at the world, and they're saying if it's not driven by data, it's not of importance to me. And the big implications there are, number one, is that to me distribution is going to become king, not content. That what everyone wants to understand is, how do I find out who you are and how do I deliver my content to you? And they want big data to do that. So content to follow the person. And if you're not familiar with the term retargeting, you need to become. They're using it very much in the advertising world, and I think in the editorial world, that is going to become important as well. So, and I do not believe that most of us in this room have the tools necessary to survive in a world that's driven by big data. And that scares me. I shouldn't say, I think I have the tool set around me, not me and me personally, but the normal tool set that we have of kind of thinking in terms of content analysis and building a database and drawing some human-driven insights, I think that is extremely valuable. It is just not valued by the people who control the money. They're thinking in terms of big data. And so in that reason, I'm fairly optimistic, fairly pessimistic about the survival of many of us in our businesses in the future. So there's your bit of pessimism. Big data has more to do with, when we think of normally in terms of, and this is something that we grapple with when we talk about social media standards, is we're thinking, we normally think in terms of databases and individual, okay, there was this event, there was this piece of content that happened on such and such day. And in big data, you have to include, 1,000 linkages onto that one little piece of data. And it includes, what we normally think of as just simple structured and unstructured, but it has everything to do with relationships. But those relationships start growing infinite when you go beyond, what just was this media? I need to understand the demographics of each individual who interacted with that media and the ones that they interacted with. And then we also need to pull in, information about geography. We need to pull in information about timing, and timing doesn't have to do with days. Timing has to do with what were the events that preceded this and what are the events that come after it. And then you start saying, well, that also has to do with their ability to act on that data. So, what is it that I'm trying to get out of them? Oh, well, I want them to purchase something online. Well, that's pretty simple. Well, I want them to purchase something that's in a store, or I want them to go to an event, or I want them to them to vote. And the number of databases that you could think of that need to have an input into understanding the situation grows almost infinite. And so the idea of being able to to simply map these databases in the way that we normally think about them becomes irrelevant. And so all of a sudden, it becomes, Google says, I have a question, I'm going to throw $800,000 at it that Andy mentioned. They can do that. And not many of us have, $800,000 that we can throw out to answer a single question. And it's the answer to that question, I think, is what will continue to enamor people who have money. And that's what frightens me.
Casey, we need to move on, but I suspect we will come back to this at the...
Good, I didn't want any more questions.
Casey obviously didn't make it to the briefing, but thank you very much, Casey.
Thanks, Casey. It's always good to get an audience who's just been told they're going to be out of business. And for really about the first 5 minutes of what I'm going to speak about now, you're all going to be sitting there thinking, I wonder if he was talking about my business or not. So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points from my fellow panelists first. I think, or I should state first, I'm very positive about the industry, but I like change. I welcome change, and I think our businesses have to welcome it and work through it. That's the positive part of what I see. I think just picking up on a few points, Jeremy talking about content, I think it's enormously important. I thought that argument was behind us, to tell you the truth, in some respects. But with audiences, fragmentation, and where content is moving onto different platforms, we need better agreements with publishers so we can actually move with the content through the different ways that people consume that content. At the moment, a lot of our agreements are very much newspaper related. So we've got a lot of room to move on that space, and I think the point that Jeremy made was very important to where we're going. I've got a couple of different views on if content or distribution's key, which KC was bringing up. And I think it might be part of the panel discussion to go through that. But in a lot of respects, I followed a very, very similar way to what KC talked about. My first thing was to talk about, well, what is the consumer looking for? What is the audience engagement and experience that they want to receive from a media company now? And a lot of the points were in KC's, but the first thing to me is it's real time now. And where he said there isn't a news cycle, I think there is a news cycle, but it's an incredibly short news cycle, being driven by the alerting that's happening in social media, but also that the audience want to be up to date with an event. They need it real time, and they want to have that access to that information in that space. So that creates some real issues for us. And what I want to do is talk about the audience, talk about how the media is adapted in some ways, but then talk a little bit about, well, what does that mean for our client base, and how do we actually serve those clients in this new environment? Personalisation, and I think we were talking about targeting. It is a place, obviously, where the media is going to spend an enormous amount of money. It's not per se to target that information that we want to see, it's to make sure that the advertising links with that content. So there's a relationship that when you're in the mindset of consuming that issue or that news piece, that you actually get some relevance around that advertising that's been served to you at that same time. So it is going to be one of the areas, and it's an interesting piece. I mean, some people love editors to give them that broad community of news that's happening in your part of the world. But more and more people are just saying, I want to see the news that's important to me. I want to see it from the sources that I respect. And I really believe in what KC, we've already seen it, branded journalists. People want to see the journalists more than the actual title of the paper so far. Now getting those branded journalists or branded content creators into their set of media on a daily basis. We know we just don't want to consume it anymore. It's got to be interactive. We want to comment on it. We want to share it. We want to pass it through to other people to make their comments on it as well. And I think that's one of the great pieces of where we can add to our analysis services, and we'll come back to that. And it's obviously availability. I actually still believe in the content paradigm and talking about the platforms that people actually want to consume it on. So that to me is where I think a media audience wants to have that experience, and what media companies are trying to succeed in. So is the Australian market succeeding? Well, they've certainly diversified, and they have done a really good job in actually growing their audience. If you look at
they're the four main players in Australia. There's one as well, which is Nine Entertainment, which is a very has a different set. So I wanted to bring four companies that were very similar. When you look at Fairfax Media, that company 10 years ago was just Metro newspapers, and they've bought and acquired businesses in New Zealand, they've bought regional newspapers, they've moved into radio, but they've also built some great franchises online as well. And so to me, they've actually done a great job of cross-platforming their content, being able to use all the different platforms to reach an audience, and try to work with the audience through the day. And if we look at what they've still done is, in Australia, the agenda setter on the big issues is still newspapers, including their online. So to me, with the fragment or the diversification of those media companies, what they've been able to achieve is still have the audience come to them for the agenda setting through the day, but then move with those audience through different platforms, including radio and television, regional publications online. So they actually stay with that audience as they've actually wanted to change their consuming habits through the day. John Hartigan, he was recently left News Limited, but he was the chairman and the CEO of News Limited. And I think it's a comment of what's in the mindset of a company like News is they used to want to run the agenda first thing in the morning. Now they want to run the agenda throughout the day with the different platforms that they have, and they want to run it every day. So they've also, in Australia, they did a very good job of moving online very early. So they're the top 10 sites in Australia. It's interesting the BBC is still there in our top 10 sites. But it's around The Guardian, it's around the New York Times. The Sydney Morning Herald had its best readership numbers ever was 250,000. Now they're up to 4 million unique visitors on a monthly basis coming to their website. So these companies are doing a great job at growing their audiences and working with them through the day. And they're also doing a great job in actually developing apps for downloads as we become more mobile and want to do that. There's only 22 million people in Australia and we have 3 million downloads. But we have the same problem in our market as everyone else, is every one of those apps is free at the moment and they're not covering the revenue that they've lost in the classified and the display ads in their newspapers. But what they are seeing is some change, and they are starting to see that in the tablet environment, 13% of people are happy to pay now for their newspaper consumption. And that doesn't still sound like a lot of numbers, but it's up there with music, it's down with movies and the rest. So there is that payment model coming through in the minds of a consumer. The problem is it isn't covering the gap, and the last 2 weeks we're talking about 400 journalists being made redundant in Australia. It's a story that happens every day of the week in Australia at the present time. Kylie's nodding her head because I know her own company had to get rid of some journalists overnight. So that's a problem for us. I was talking to the editor of the Sydney Morning Herald 2 weeks ago. They're down 50 pages per week for the Monday, Friday. So that's 10 pages of news and current affairs on a daily basis. It's no longer coming into the consumption of a newspaper person. On the other side, we have unlimited inventory on the online. So global comparisons, I thought I'd just bring some context. So the Australian market is in fairly good shape. In newspaper advertising expenditure, it's on a year-on-year, we're up 1.3%. Whenever a CEO or any of the industries start to use percentage, you know we're coming from a low base. It was down 3% the year before. So we're back to where we were 2 years ago. But on a global space, it's still pretty good. And it probably leads us into Asia. Asia is the good news story. It's incredible the growth that's still happening in Asia. There's a couple of elements that you have to understand about Asia first up. The first thing is ownership. So there's a large amount of government ownership of the media companies through Asia. So that's shielded them from the economic troubles that other media proprietors have had throughout the world. And the other thing that's really important is government control. So they both own and control the media. And it actually has brought social media up to be far more influential, far quicker in those markets than any other place that we've seen. So that's a great opportunity for us in what was very staid markets, where there was no surprises in the morning newspapers or in the online sites that these companies played. It is such a good market because there's a huge new consumers in China and the rest of Asia. So the global brands are trying to reach those consumers in the ways. So the advertising and the growth is there. You'll see China has an actual circulation increase of 14% in their newspapers, and it's the largest newspaper market in the world. And you sort of think about China in the last 3 years, it's changed dramatically from what was just really smartphone devices or people accessing the internet through their mobile phones, now to 68% of the people on the eastern side of the country having internet access and accessing it from home as well. So I sort of just changed gear a little bit here, and I thought, well, let's just think about these new clients that we've got in China. And when you look at this, you might run off and say, hey, I want to go to China because it looks like a great market and we should serve it. It's still very fragmented and quite small, so not everyone should go there if they think that's the way to get past Casey's end of business scenario. But it's funny, they haven't been grown up on a diet of press clips, so they actually just want the daily media analysis report to them. They don't actually want the clips, the outputs and those sorts of things. Just tell us what it means, and we want that on a daily basis. The measurement and the evaluation is still poor, but it is actually a situation that it is growing in the way that it's growing, and it's growing because Chinese companies are looking global and wanting to bring those dashboards and those environments into their business in a very quick way. I'll keep going because I'm going to get thrown out of here very quickly. So to me, if you just bring that back into my summary slide, to me, how we have to change is, first up, it has to be integrated. The content from social, traditional, whatever platforms, our clients are having integrated communications. They expect us to report on in that way, and they need it presented in that way. Second time, the media cycle is so short, it has to be real time. And that's a huge challenge to engineer our businesses completely differently. So when a piece of information leaves our organisation, it should have the measurement and the evaluation attached to it at the same time. I think there's still utility in a report in a month's time or in a quarter's time where you kept score. But if we really want to deliver insight that people can actually action, we have to be in that real-time space with the media cycle being so short. It has to be accessible, so the dashboard that was shown by Andy, to me that is the future of where it's going, and it has to be able to be distributed through an organisation in a very quick and efficient way. And it's customised. It has to be built to the outcomes of what they want from the business output. So we have tools to bring the different measures and evaluation together, but in the end, to me, it has to link to the business strategy. So thank you very much. I got 3 minutes. So any questions? Good. I'll slip out. Oh, okay.
And I completely agree with all the points that you're making there in terms of where we've got to go with our businesses. The issue is a challenge, especially around the aspect of real-time and real-time analytics. Do you see then that we're going to be moving towards more automated sentiment analysis? I mean, because the challenge is if you've got to deliver that at the point that it's, if you like, visible to your client, how do you then build the analytics into that have the validity?
I don't know.
I was hoping you could answer it.
I think the piece is, it's always been, we've been worried by the volume. I think we now have to be worried by what is the influential pieces of content. So there are only a certain amount that actually drives the agenda, and I think they're the pieces that have to be real time. So I think in the past, we've always wanted to have a very comprehensive analysis service that has so much content in it. But I think what the clients are looking for is that real time on the influential pieces, and for us to do a really good job on that. And then the rest, if they want it for the reach and the other measures that they have, that can follow. But that's how I think we should attack the problem. But it's a big task.
What software do you use? Your own or?
Combinations, yeah. Look, there's some great software out there, and thanks to the supporters of AMEC who have put the money to make it happen. But I think we use components that you can buy off the shelf, but I think then it's how you actually work through the pieces that you can automate with the data extraction and such. But then we use Karma for some of our tools, but we're actually developing other areas as well, which we're sort of working with Karma and others at that point at the moment. So that's a roundabout way of saying I'm not telling you, really.
John, I've got a question for you. How integrated is your social media offering?
Yeah, so we bought Brentology in Asia. It's a fantastic business. We have done a number of integrated reports, but it's certainly like the swan, where it looks graceful when we give it to the client, but we're paddling like hell underwater to make it happen. So there are some real issues at the moment around some of the standards of measurement in the social media space and sort of bring that together with measures that make sense in the traditional. So, look, we've had some very good outcomes, but an enormous amount of work to actually make it work.
Richard's leading a good session on Friday, hopefully, to address some of those challenges. So
I'll turn up, Richard.
Friday morning, no drinking, John.
I can't guarantee.
John, thank you. I think we need to move on. So thank you very much, John.
Good afternoon. Okay. Well, I think I come from a part of the world where we do have real chaos in our media environment. In fact, we have real chaos in every environment where I come from. But like we saw earlier, from chaos comes great things. And I believe that the Middle East and North Africa, or in other words, the Arab world, is in for great things because we are looking at a unique time in history, a unique time in the media environment over there, where we had 300 million people who basically had no media. They had no voice. We talk about content or distribution. Well, we had none of that. And now, all of a sudden, we're about to have all of that. So let me give you a quick idea of where we are in terms of our growth of media vehicles. All kinds of media are growing at an exponential rate across the entire region. Traditional media, in particular, remains very strong. And if you look at a few of the numbers, and I think they're all quite interesting in terms of the time frame, 1992, just after the first Gulf War, 2002, just before the Iraq War, number 3, and 2012, where we are today. If you were to look at national daily circulation newspapers, not a small, localized, or provincial publication, just look at the numbers. They have grown dramatically. In terms of magazines as well, I mean, every time our people come and tell us we have another client who wants us to add another 30 magazines to our monitoring reading list, the number of publications is soaring. And every day we hear about a new publication being launched. Everything, television, radio. I can't think of any kind of media vehicle in any country in the Arab world which is not growing at an exponential rate. And actually, if you convert those numbers into percentages, they are unbelievable growth rates. And these are people who are hiring, and they're recruiting designers and journalists and so on. So hopefully a few of those Australian guys who need to find a quick job can come over to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha or Amman or, believe it or not, next year, Baghdad. Online has grown very quickly. And as part of the chaos, we're seeing a two-tier market, if you will, of the traditional media growing exponentially and online and digital and social growing very quickly as well. A young population, about 60% of people in that part of the world are under the age of 25, and they are going onto social media very quickly. The latest numbers published by Arab Advisors, a research group, our version of TNS, if you will, or Kantar, estimates about 110 million people in the Arab world being online. And if you compare that to only a decade ago, it's a huge amount of growth. I think another important shift in the media environment is ownership. Virtually all media used to be government-owned until recently, and that has shifted dramatically. Number one, governments are becoming less involved in media ownership. They're finding it expensive, and not all of the countries in the Arab world have oil. They can't afford to keep on publishing new newspapers and launching new TV stations. And then you have a huge amount of growth in what I call oases of freedom, places like Dubai, places like Doha, places like Abu Dhabi, and now places like Cairo, where the individual business person or politician or political party or business or individual can actually launch a new publication. And just like worldwide, there's a euphoria on the excitement of social media and how it can impact our life in many positive ways. We're actually having a time of euphoria on traditional media because we've never had it. And having a newspaper is actually a very interesting thing, not only because it's functional and readable and it has a utility, but also because people look at print media as a status symbol. If you're carrying a particular magazine or a newspaper, that actually says something about who you are as a person, or which political group or social group that you are affiliated with. And I actually heard that from a business partner of mine who's Chinese and lives in Dubai. And he said, print media, the magazine that I take to work with, or that I read on the plane, or that I put under my shoulder when I'm going to work, tells people who I am and what my interests are. So believe it or not, it's not just a news and utility of information, it's actually a status symbol in our part of the world. Here are a few quick numbers about the big growth in numbers in places which were very authoritarian in their control of media and have now changed. After Gaddafi was removed in Libya, there were 57 new newspaper launches. And I haven't included the ones which were shut down, because there are many more. I think the number was actually closer to 200. But since post-revolution Gaddafi's removal, 57 continue to operate, 57 daily newspapers. In Syria, the revolution isn't even over, and the opposition has launched 8 TV stations, which are broadcasting on satellite and 24 hours through digital and online medium. And in Iraq, relatively small country, 25 million people, a large number of TV stations have been launched as well. Not only do you have local media outlets being launched, but you have a flood of international investment in our part of the world. In fact, Sky News Arabia launched 2 weeks ago. Who would be thinking that all of these international players would come to our part of the world? And why are they there? There are multiple reasons. We can talk about them later. But you have a big interest in the Arab mind, in the Arab condition, in the future of where we are heading as a region. And everyone's trying to rebrand. Russia Today, BBC Arabic, which in 1996 shut down their Arabic TV station, and they let go of around 100 broadcast journalists. The Emir of Qatar said, well, why don't you 100 come and we'll launch something called Al Jazeera. He went and he took an agreement with the BBC that they can waive their non-compete agreements. And the BBC actually warned Qatar that it would be a waste of time and money. And today, you all know what Al Jazeera means, not only to us as a people, but what it means and what kind of impact it has on the world. France 24, the CNN logo in Arabic looks a bit weird and snaky, but they're there too. So in terms of behavioral trends, I think there's a very heavy correlation between online and traditional media. They're impacting each other in a very significant way. But thought leadership definitely remains embedded in a very strong way in traditional media. We cannot compare an influencer on social or digital media with an influencer in traditional media. Not yet, but I don't see that changing soon. However, social media has given the public and the masses the opportunity to become active and to have revolutions and to do whatever they need to do to get their way. So when it comes to measuring influence, traditional media is actually far more important than social media. But when it comes to trends and public movement, social media is in fact far more important than traditional media. In terms of the communications industry, I mean, what can I say? We started off, and public relations was viewed as a passport shuffling service when I was working in an agency back in 1996. And when you said I work as a PR professional, people would say, oh, well, you'll take my passport and get it renewed. Today, that's different, and public relations spending between the agency side and in-house has exceeded $1 billion. Might not sound like a huge amount of money, but give that another 2 years, give it another 5 years, and that number is going to grow. To kind of give you an idea of the financial and economic situation in the region, the Gulf Arab states have more money than China, okay? And they have combined 40 million people. China has, what, 1.6 billion or so, plus or minus. So imagine that. I mean, China has a cash surplus, or let's say $3.5 trillion in the bank. The Gulf Arab states have $5.5 trillion in cash in the bank. And they're investing on all kinds of activity, from economic and social, and of course, on media. And people now have the freedom and the confidence to comment on that activity. Large number of people who are joining the industry through education and so on. I won't spend too much time over there, but from a measurement point of view, I think we've really come a long way. We used to have, if you will, a Lebanese mafia, because they kind of controlled all advertising spending in the region until recently. And when the communications manager, Dutch gentleman at Unilever, said, "I'm no longer going to pay any more advertising if you don't audit your publications," the number of audited publications declined. And that's just to give you an idea of how strong that control was. But thanks to social media, the exponential growth in all kinds of vehicles, that control on spending has been broken. And people now have the opportunity and the right to demand measurement. And there is a hugely competitive market in the region. 23 countries, almost none of which have proper people metering, almost none of which have proper comprehensive field research across the board. It is a virgin market. From a PR and comms point of view, I think thanks to the work that we've done in the region, us, our colleagues in the industry, AMEC has been there as well. We've managed to break the back of AVEs. They're not gone, but I think there has been a qualitative shift in thinking to more outcome-related measurement. So in brief, just to finalize before the Q&A, imagine if someone came and told Europe, you've got 175 million new media consumers, or to the former Soviet Union. Well, that's actually happened. In the past few years, there are 175 million new people who watch TV, read the newspaper, go online, who weren't doing that just a few years ago. And I think that's one of the main reasons why you're finding all of that political upheaval, because traditional media like Al Jazeera opened the doors of the Arab people to the world. Social media like Facebook, Twitter, Maktub gave them an open door to the world and the confidence to walk into the world. But now that they have that confidence, they're changing things. It's a logical conclusion that we're starting by tidying up our political mess. But what comes after that? It's economic competitiveness, it's social change. And all of that will require communications, and all of that will require measurement. So I believe that we are in an amazing time. I'm extremely bullish and optimistic about our market. I think it will continue to see huge growth moving forward. And you have 350 million people who didn't speak, think, or talk for more than 1,000 years, and now they're going to. There's an awful lot of insight to be done in that regard. Happy to take any questions.
So, do you think that you are in a better place than other markets because you get to start from scratch in a way? And do you think that eventually you'll be case study of how it's done well, marrying media growth plus marketing growth plus measurement growth? They're all with them all happening at once. Should we be looking to the Middle East as how it's
a great question, and I would answer as humbly as I can. I think we are not carrying the baggage and the challenges and the difficulties that your traditional media monitoring and analysis company has in the rest of the world. We don't have to deal with all of the challenges of dealing with publishers and licensing and so on. In fact, by the time that any kind of group of publishers get their act together in our part of the world, it'll be too late because we're all going to be engagement-driven. And that's exactly how we are engineering our business. We're engineering our business to become an engagement-driven business. And we believe there's an awful lot of content, an awful lot of insight. We call it all-source information. And whether it's on a content platform or a distribution platform, which in effect is also a content channel in itself, it all needs to be done. So we're lucky to be starting at a point where the region is starting from scratch, as you said. There's very good liquidity, which means people can buy data and they have a respect for data. And we're a young company. We were established only 10 years ago. And when we started digital. We didn't even have a fax service or glue or scissors. So we came into the game quite late. And being roughly 350 to 370 people, we have the opportunity to reach a higher number in terms of clients, customers, and revenue, but hopefully with fewer people and less problems.
Mazen, thank you very much for the full picture of your market. It was really interesting. You told us about all these millions of new media consumers. Do you see an opportunity for your company in a B2C market?
We've thought about it and we kind of ruled it out at this stage. The challenge that we've had, like everyone in the room today, is where is our business going? And we recognize that we are in an age of transformation. We're transforming into an engagement-driven company. Whether we're going to be focused on engagement-driven analytics or engagement-driven consulting is a question that we still need to resolve. But another part of the sort of internal brainstorming that we had is we have a huge amount of content. And we have a huge amount of digitally archived content and excellent technology platforms to deliver that content. Usually if you're a B2C portal or a social network, people come up with the idea, they build the platform, then they scramble to fund it, they scramble to populate it with content and with people. We've got the content, we've got the people, we've got the technology. We just need to actually go ahead and put the platform and announce it. So it's very tempting for us to go down the route of becoming a B2C content solutions provider. In fact, within News Group, we have a company called Context, which happens to be the largest provider of content solutions in the Middle East. It, again, was launched in 2009. It went from 2 or 3 people in our translation department to around 130 writers, editors, and content specialists. We're doing a whole bunch of websites and so on. That model is working for us as a wholesaler of content. I don't think we want to go into the B2C area yet because we continue to have monitoring and measurement as our core business. And we wouldn't want to upset, effectively, the publishers and media who we monitor and measure. But down the line, could we change that? Maybe.
Mazen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to change the sort of tone and pace a little bit by talking more about media consumption and the economics of media business supply, if you like, generally, rather than specifically about measurement, analytics, and those good topics, although clearly I'll talk a little bit about those too. We've just had a very optimistic talk about a very optimistic part of the world where media is in growth. And I think there's a really significant story here about how media fragmentation doesn't necessarily mean that everything is collapsing. Actually, media fragmentation can be a growth story. And one of the key issues, I think, facing many territories today is that news is a more popular medium. It's a growth story in almost every territory you can think of, in fact. And yet the economics behind the supply of news is perhaps the issue at its heart. This first slide looks at newspapers around the world. This is physical distribution of newspapers. And it's a story we all know and recognize. It's one where in the US and in Western Europe and so on, there is a story of quite significant decline, whereas in some other parts of the world, there is some significant growth. What you're seeing, I think, in Europe and in the US is, of course, a shift in consumption, which is a significant shift towards interaction, driven first of all by younger demographics, but then picked up by older demographics as well. And I think there's a really significant story to be told about the generation change, the generation of media online savvy consumers and how they will change media consumption for everyone going forward. At the same time, for a lot of those territories I've just mentioned, there is an aging population. And that has a kind of curious kind of balancing effect in the sense that that aging population will continue to consume some old media for long periods of time yet. There is a significant shift as well in terms of what it is that's being supplied, a shift, I think, from content to service, which is a theme that I will touch upon. This next slide looks at internet access. So this is internet access across the so-called developed world, moving towards 1 billion people accessing the internet from desktop services. But it's the orange and green lines, of course, that are really significant, because the orange and green lines is about mobile. And mobile and social are the two big twin themes of our times, I think. The reason that these are so important is that they are more substitutional than desktop access, particularly for things like news, but specifically for print media. And there's a very simple logic to this, I think, which is that mobile devices are used at 5 times in the day or in 5 places in our lives that the desktop simply never gets access to. That's in bed, it's on the breakfast table, it's on the loo, forgive me, commute, and on the sofa. And those 5 places are classic print media places. They're classic print media times of the day where print media is consumed, and therefore there is a huge risk of substitution on that basis. And it is about print media suffering this because media generally is not suffering from some of these kind of aspects. In fact, television, I think we've already mentioned this this morning, television is actually, consumption trends are actually up. And in the UK, which is where this data is from, they're up partly because of delayed viewing through devices and through different services. But it's still very much based around the TV schedule. And there's a kind of myth around TV viewing drifting away from the schedule in some kind of complete kind of Wild West type of way. That's not true. 97% of TV consumption is still related to the schedule. There's no surprise that in the UK, lots of people are watching Mad Men at the moment, rather than at a different time, even if they're not watching it precisely when Sky broadcast it. The next couple of slides show the collapse in advertising in terms of print. I just wanted to touch on advertising very briefly. So again, advertising has gone through quite significant decline as a result of the internet and also as a result of recession. But it is print media rather, that have particularly suffered. And again, you can see here the comparison of print media advertising expenditure against the huge growth of the internet, but the grand total up marginally. What I did want to talk about was the degree, and this is US figures, what I did want to talk about was the degree to which newspaper publishers have built up a massive advertising model in actually relatively recent times, all things considered. If you go back to 1980 and before, there was a period of many decades in many mature markets, again in Europe and the US in particular perhaps, where actually advertising grew slowly, building the model slowly, but a lot of the income was still coming from users buying individual newspapers. And what happened after that period, around 1980, was that retail in particular, and also the classified advertising models around recruitment and property and so on, exploded. Huge amounts of income came into the industry. And part of the argument that we've made at Enders when we compare different kind of media types is that the newspaper industry is in effect returning to its roots. It's returning back to the kind of model that actually it had in existence for the previous 100 years. A particular problem in the UK is around subscriptions. The reason I bring this up is because I think subscriptions are really critical to media businesses going forward as they transfer to digital. If you're going to be able to get money out of consumers to pay for your content, you're going to have to convince them to sign up to something. And iTunes is a model that may work perfectly in certain circumstances and certainly has been working well for some media businesses. But there's a huge underlying philosophical problem for many print media businesses in some territories that they simply don't have a subscription model for their print business. I mean, 6% in the UK for newspaper businesses, clearly much higher for other types of business. So I think in the UK in particular, there is going to be a huge problem transferring audiences across. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the advertising kind of rate card. This is, of course, ultimately a huge problem, perhaps one of the biggest existential problems for many of these media businesses, is that they can't generate anything like the same kind of advertising revenue as they can in traditional on the printed page. So these are in pounds and sterling the rates per 1,000 users for these services. Specialist services like Rightmove and what's called their TMG, which is Auto Trader, they're able to generate much higher revenues per user than more general services like The Guardian, The Mail Online, or indeed The New York Times. That is the nature of the beast when you move online. But you can compare any of these figures to a physical newspaper, which would still be generating somewhere in the region of £10 plus per month per user. The other big challenge in terms of advertising is why use media at all? Why not just pull apart the content and the content supply and the distribution strategy entirely and go direct to consumers? Surely that is the whole point of the internet. Burberry is just a case study. It's an example of a type of business that has chosen to go directly to its audience. Burberry has a big marketing budget. It's a very successful manufacturer and retail business based in the north of England, but with retail stores throughout the world. It spends 58–60% of its marketing budget on digital and other services getting directly to consumers. That is a game changer for media businesses because it works around media businesses. A couple of thoughts on what media businesses are doing, and I think this comes back to a point that was raised just in the last talk about in a sense, starting from scratch means you don't have to go through all this kind of legacy, challenge, as it were. And these businesses, big media businesses with big advertising teams, huge editorial teams, complex kind of operating kind of environments, have been in existence for a very long time indeed, with one very simple model in mind. We create content, we create a single product, a single manifestation of our content, and consumers buy it. It's brilliant. It's perfect. And they also get income, of course, from advertisers in that model. And what they're having to adapt to is not about content supply, it's about service supply. And that is about putting the consumer at the center, and it's creating a whole myriad of manifestations for their output. But it's all about what does the consumer need and when do they need it. This is the equivalent model for the music industry, just to show that we're not just entirely obsessed entirely with news. So the music industry has gone through exactly the same thing. The consumer is much more engaged in the modern consumption of music than he or she was in the past. It's a particular challenge. This challenge is a particular challenge for newspapers precisely because of the huge fixed costs involved in supplying news from a big newsroom. And just very quickly, finally, kind of final thoughts. One is that, as I mentioned right at the beginning, news consumption is actually more popular now than at any point in the past and appears to be growing even still as we speak. The difficulty is the economics behind it. Print medium, for what it's worth, I think will become, it's not going to disappear. I'm not suggesting for a second it's going to vanish, but I think what is going to happen is that it's going to become more niche, become more luxury, become more specialist, and perhaps become something that is built around particular services and particular unique events and so on as well. 3 thoughts on media businesses. One is that there will be a divergence to big, successful global businesses where scale matters and they can make the economics of that work, and a lot more niche businesses, a long, thick tail of niche businesses, specialist businesses. The businesses that will lose out are what used to be the big profitable middle, if you like, the businesses that were the also-rans, but weren't necessarily the market leaders, but were able to generate a huge profit by being a middle player. The second thing is that clearly measurement is becoming more important. The big challenge for many businesses, and I don't mean media or news businesses, but for many businesses, is that they have tons of data, they have tons of information. It does not mean that they have more insight, more knowledge, or more understanding either of their consumers or what their advertisers need or anyone else. And the third and the final point in my talk is that advertising itself, I think, is going through something of an existential crisis, and advertising will change dramatically, I think, over the next few years. We've barely begun to see, I think, what's going to happen, and expenditure will move to technology and different types of service, again, which could sit around media rather than within media. And that's it. Thank you. And we have 3 minutes, I think, for questions. Hi.
In your world map, in your circulation world map, Africa was grayed out, and I just want to add that in an interview earlier this year, the IFRA president Matthew also said that the growth rate of circulation of newspapers in Africa is as large as in Asia. So it's really should be worse to have a green color there.
It's probably a fair point. Thank you.
You have yet discovery will become a greater challenge in that last bullet. Can you follow up with what you mean by that?
Yeah, there are various kind of manifestations, if you will, to this kind of question. I think the point is that in the old traditional world, the consumer had fewer options available to him or her, and so the whole kind of discovery question was quite easy. Music is quite a good example of this, actually. You kind of went to HMV if you were in the UK to find out about music. You listened to radio, and suddenly you have a whole myriad of different options. And so discovery could be described as easier and more exciting and all the rest of it, but actually it's harder, because finding exactly what is right for you is harder. But then that is why personalized services become so important.
Douglas, I've got one for you. What does all of that mean for us, do you think?
Trick question. I guess overall, I think it's good news, because I think you're in the land of running businesses that are all about analytics and all about reputation and all about the flow of information and what it means, interpretation, what that information kind of really means. And that, I think, is where you kind of have to kind of focus going forward. All your clients from various different kind of walks of life, running different types of business, are under enormous amounts of pressure to try and interpret what any of this means. And they don't have the specialist skills in-house. Some of them will. But the vast majority are flailing around. They don't understand really kind of how to use this information to make decisions. And that, I think, is what you need to kind of focus on. But it feels to me like a really exciting opportunity, but a very difficult one perhaps to implement and execute.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Douglas.
Right. I'm going to endeavour to just sum up in a minute or so before we move into the Q&A section of this session. But I hope you'll agree, broadly, a pretty optimistic session with one outlier, which I'll deal with at lunchtime. But just to sort of to wrap up, Andy was talking about good things coming out of chaos, quoting Deepak Chopra, talking about insatiable demand for return on investment. Casey is an optimist by nature, and I think the challenge that Casey was speaking to was the question of scale. And it kind of comes back to the point Douglas was just making at the end. There is a lot of data out there. In the kind of world of data aggregation, we're all quite small businesses with limited funds, and I'm guessing the challenge you're speaking to is the ability to scale quickly and to scale alongside the likes of Google and some of the big tech companies who clearly are starting to encroach on our space. John talked about what the audience is looking for and how we need to adapt to address that. He talked about what Australian publishers are doing. Looks quite healthy down there. But he also suggested we all pile into Asia. And Mazen told us just how well things are going in the Middle East. So we kind of know where to go if we want to make a living. But I thought that was all extremely positive. The reality is, whether we're based in the UK, we're based in Sydney, or we're based in Dubai, we are all becoming, or should be becoming, global companies. We all should be aggregating global content. So opportunities in these regions should be opportunities for all of us, not just for organisations located there. And it was really good to hear from Douglas as well, to get a sort of third-party perspective, and absolutely on message at the end. We didn't ask Douglas to say that, and he doesn't know our industry that well, although he has done some work with us in the past. But for him to sit outside and see an opportunity for us is great. But I guess the exercise, or the purpose of this exercise now today, is to try and spend the next 20 minutes or so coming up with some takeaways that we can all be positive about. So what should AMEC be doing as an organisation to help member companies embrace the opportunities that we've heard described here today? What should we be doing differently? And this is where you guys come in. So I'd like to invite now questions, observations from you, the audience. But great to see you keen to do so. But before you do, can I ask that everybody say who they are and where they're from? Otherwise, you'll not be allowed to ask me a question. I have it under very strict authority here. First question.
Hello. Is this working? Yes. I'm from Visit Scotland, so I'm kind of from the client side. Andy said earlier that there's a need to work with competitors to provide clients with a kind of holistic evaluation of what's going on. Do you think that's actually happening? Because one recent example, don't want to name names, but Gorkana seem to have blocked access to one of our evaluation agencies. We can't use them anymore. So just wondering what you all thought about sharing.
Sorry, what did we do?
I'll talk to you about it later, it's fine.
This is definitely going off script.
Is it happening? Are you all sharing with competitors to give clients a better understanding of what's going on?
Right. There is definitely a challenge around sharing, which kind of starts with the publishers and then kind of filters down to us. But we'll definitely talk about that one over lunch. So was that question directed at Andy?
Well, Andy has said it, but actually I was just wondering, is it actually happening, especially when we have the UK market? So is it actually happening in the UK particularly, but across everybody else as well?
What, are we sharing content and so on?
Yes. Are you sharing? So say Gorkana do our cutting service, but we look to someone else to do evaluation because they want the tender. You're still, for example, we're still your client, but that's just one example. Is that happening though? Can we see that happening for clients? And are all the companies thinking about clients from that perspective and trying to do their best for them, or is it still a case of just trying to get on with what you're doing and not share?
The reality is we have to share because we, just thinking about Gorkana for a second, I mean, we're based predominantly in the UK. In order to access content from other markets, we have to work with organisations, both some of whom are on the platform, some of whom are in the audience. We have thousands of customers, but the number of customers who are taking all of our services is actually still today relatively small. So there are many cases where we provide the monitoring and somebody else in the room will be doing the analysis, or vice versa. Richard Bagnall runs our Insight division, and many of our Insight customers, not all of our Insight customers are getting Gorkana content. Okay. They might be getting content from Precise or from other media intelligence companies in the UK. So sorry to hear about your particular incident. We'll discuss that one later.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the whole, is it actually happening? And are people like yourselves working more closely to make sure that does happen?
Absolutely.
I can answer it from when I put that point out there. I was thinking particularly in the broadest sense about working holistically to meet clients' needs with regard to data and insight, and I still believe that is the case. And picking up on something that Casey was talking about in terms of big data, etc. There's a growing demand for our data to go into those kind of systems. So you have to recognize, and there's an element there of, yes, of course, I want to have a biggish, on that list of 15 data points that they want, different data sources they want in that, I want to try and get as many of those 15, of course, but we have to be realistic about it, and we have to do what's ultimately best for the client. So I was thinking of it more in that context. Yeah. But again, as Jeremy said, I think absolutely where it's necessary, where the client wants it, we'll partner with people in order to deliver.
That's good to hear.
And if the client wants things like integrated research, which we don't do, we will partner with third parties to provide that. So I don't think there are that many organisations in the room who, Kantar is one of the few exceptions, but who are working in all disciplines that are and in all markets that our clients are interested in.
Thank you very much.
Next question.
Hello, Sofia Karakieva from Greece. We heard good success from Australia and Dubai. What about an advice for companies in troubled euro area countries so that they can remain viable and avoid failure?
I think that's a question for you, Andy, isn't it?
Thank you very much. As an organisation, we do have, not necessarily in the media valuation space, we do have businesses in Greece with regard to advertising, but also research businesses. It is incredibly tough. There is no simple answer. I mean, we are having to cut cost wherever we can. We're having to genuinely, clients always talk about, you guys need to share a bit of the pain. We are sharing a lot of the pain, and it's not easy, and it will kill a lot of businesses. That's a reality. You've seen it within the advertising space in Greece. One of the big agencies has gone. There's no easy answer. We have to be pragmatic. The business isn't there, demand is down. What do you do with that? You continue to try and meet clients' needs, but you have to cut your cloth accordingly.
Cutting costs, does it mean, when cutting costs, how much will that affect the quality of the service that you provide?
But again, that comes back to the client. So, to what extent will the client accept a compromise on quality, given that they're probably going to be spending less with you? That we're all part of the same equation. Sometimes, yes, you will have to cut your... I've always... people, again, broadening it out to market research, for example. Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do market research. You can do in-home interviewing with CAPI machinery, and that's incredibly expensive. And for a certain client segment, that's worth doing. But, it's a bit like a tailor. If you want silk for this. This is I'll build you that suit, or make you that suit. If you want something that you want that's very tactical, yeah, the key thing is to be honest and transparent with the client. I think that's the underlying golden rule.
Thanks, Andy. Thomas.
Thomas Stöckler, Independent, not the newspaper, just Independent. On behalf of many people in the room, I guess I'll ask the big data question of the panel. So we've heard 1 trillion gigabytes, many trillion gigabytes of data, and everything is interrelated, and so that sounds pretty big. But I think we need to see it in context a little bit, and so in the context of what we know now, it's pretty big. I think we can all agree. In a wider framework, we don't really know at this point in time. When the first steam engine propelled vehicles came along, there were huge concerns that people may suffer brain hemorrhages from a speed of about 20 miles per hour or something. So, travel has come a long way there. And so I think when we look at the big data question from the perspective of this industry, I think What concerns me is that there's a bit too much hubris and not enough humility in what can actually be achieved with the data. So I just wonder, maybe a brief answer from each and one of you on the panel, how you think we can address that as an industry to ultimately be more successful in addressing it.
Just in the interest of time, I might not let everybody answer if it's all right with you, Thomas. I think Casey raised the point, so I think that we'll pass that one to Casey if that's okay.
You mentioned hubris being an important ingredient, and I think most of us are very pragmatic, and I think most of us are very honest in the way that we interact with our clients and say, this is what we think is practical, this is what we think will provide you value. And I think for a lot of the people who have a lot of money, that's not what they're interested in. I think they will ignore those things and they will go with those who have hubris and those who have deep pockets. And so that's at the root of my pessimism, and I'm afraid that that you will have. You mentioned, I mentioned again the $800,000 to answer a single question, and with that, I'll come up with with one answer, and I will go and present that to a billion-dollar brand and say, let's lock up a 5-year agreement for $10 million a year to continue to answer these questions for you. In the meantime, these practical, immediately valuable answers that we can provide get swept to the side. So,
and I don't think we're hubristic, and apologies for our general optimism. That was kind of the brief, because we're at the start of a conference. We want to get everyone, we want to make people feel a little bit upbeat about the next few days. But I think we're all genuinely. There's a lot of opportunity, but there are a lot of people wandering around quite, trying to understand how to grapple with that opportunity. And I put a slide up that had 6 cuttings on. I actually didn't explain it. I realise now the time. But the point of that was it's a framed picture that we have on the wall. Actually, it's not on the wall anymore. It's in a room somewhere in Gorkana. It was on the wall when we first turned up, and it was showing the evolution of cuttings over 110 years. I think it was from 1891 to 1990 to 2001. And what you'll notice is nothing changed in 110 years. What's frightening a lot of us is the pace of change. Businesses are changing beyond recognition in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And, we're constantly all sat here trying to think, how can we not even get ahead of the market, but just try and keep pace with it. And we're all worried about Google and the rest of it. So I'd like to think we're not hubristic. John, you wanted to...
Yeah, I just wanted to do it. It's interesting. I think it does create opportunities. I'm actually with KC that I am worried by the power that's coming into this big data equation and the people that we'll have to compete with. But if you come from the monitoring business that's grown into evaluation, our whole business paradigm was having a great big data set and giving people a very small portion of that was based on some brief that we received some period ago, and we just confirmed something happened. So to me, there's only a certain amount of utility in confirming something happened. If you create the data set that we've got in real time across many different markets and then allow the tools to actually start searching through that and linking the social media and the trends and the different issues, there are some great opportunities for us there, but you need great dashboard and good tools in the client's hands to actually be able to get through that. So, there's challenges and there's threats there from exactly the same question.
Thanks, John. Philip, you had a question.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's Philip from Cantor. I actually had probably about 3 questions, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on one. And it's directed primarily at Andy. I don't want to big up... I can change it. I can ask
whatever
the
it is,
other
you
one.
can't have it.
I can ask the other one about Casey's socks. No, about digital set and the wider implications of more of what we do being in a digital space. And my question is this: since the year dot, I think the biggest challenge facing PR and our delivery to PR has been a very basic issue with being able to isolate the contribution of PR within the communications mix against advertising and all the other myriad communications and influences that go on the minds of consumers. In digital share, you're isolating paid for search, banners, discussion, and everything. Now, if you bring that all together to create a single value, then you can tease it all apart to create individual values. So, not just with reference to Kantar digital share, but in the wider digital space, does the panel think we are getting closer to being able to deliver, you know, an answer to the problem that I think has been bugging PR since its inception?
Thanks, Phil. That's an easy one. Seeing as you threw it at me first, I mean, just remember the Kantar digital share is reporting what's happened. So it is taking published data sets and bringing them together into a single aggregated platform. The idea is that, though, to your point, that it will link with other research tools and other research capabilities. So the idea is that we would be able to link that, and Milward Brown are involved in this discussion as well, and I can trail Dan's session this afternoon with Milward Brown. But Milward Brown are involved in taking that, in effect, input data or reported data, and then trying to link it back to understand the individual components and to what extent each of them have contributed. I can't answer your question. I think we're probably closer than we've ever been, Phil, because PR has changed, and it's changed into a more, in my view, it's changed into a more measurable delivery through social media. So we can capture more and we can isolate more of the contribution. You know, it's no secret that most of the big media agencies and marketing services companies have begun to employ large numbers of econometricians in order to do exactly as you say there, to extract or try to extract the value of each of the components of a multi-faceted campaign. So I think we're closer than we've ever been. Come on, he said the panel.
Actually, if I could just answer a quick second question as Casey's about to take the microphone. Casey, you mentioned about the importance of distribution. In a more cynical business world, you could replace distribution with access, at which point it becomes valuable. Now, in the advertising world, we've already seen media owners get a very sophisticated understanding of consumers, and it's created such things as auctions, biddable advertising, where brand owners are now being charged for access to consumers. Now, at the moment, social is a big free space, but LinkedIn could do this, Facebook could do this, Google Chrome could do this on a global scale. So what do you think, do you see the future as being distribution as always being free, or do you see there being the rise of paid for access in your new world?
I would say I would limit my new world to the United States, because I think each culture has its own norms as to what their willingness to have a pay-for-play sort of environment. We see variations of that today. But you mentioned access versus when I'm thinking of the distribution and the sophistication that will be demanded is that people track who you are. So someone who wants to sell something to you, wants to reach you in a political way, whatever it is, someone who is targeting you, is they want to figure out not how to provide you access to content that they want you to see, but how they inject that content into the places you go. So they are actively following you. They're not setting up things that you will happen into. Instead, they're actively following you. And when, I mean, you know this today, if you go to a search page, what comes up in the search results will be different for you versus me. And it's not just having to do with the IP that we're coming at it from, or the geography that it's because there are trends in what you have searched and what you have sought online versus what I've done. And so I think, you know, the content providers being media, but then also going to how I was talking about kind of branded content, that a seller of some service is going to seek you out and figure out how to inject what they do into the sports page that you look at, even though it might not necessarily be tied directly to sports. They will seek some sports tie-in to make sure that it gets to you. And to the degree that we fail to provide information to facilitate that, we become less relevant. Is that?
I think on that note, and Philip, no, you don't get your third question because the green light may be on, but Barry's going red. So just to wrap up, I think we can end by saying that we're kind of cautiously optimistic. Clearly, there's some questions we need to answer. This big data question that Casey raised is a big one. John talked about listening to our audience. We clearly need to do more of that. We need to differentiate ourselves from players coming into this market, whether they be some of the big publishers themselves, Google and so on. But I think above all, AMEC needs to lead. And this is where the organisation comes in. I think Friday's session on social media measurement, which talks about cutting through client confusion and leading the market, enough about the bullshit, all about best practice, promise, and so on. I think that's a really important session. So I would encourage you all to attend that. But clearly we can continue this debate in the bars of Dublin. But at this point, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for putting up with us and sitting through the last 2 hours and for your engaging questions. But most of all, I'd like to thank our panel today, Andy, Casey, John, Mazen and Doug. Thank you very much.